Hello and welcome back again to That Tracks F1 podcast with me, your host Jodie. It's great to have you here for this, our review of the Barcelona-Catalunya Grand Prix. Well, it was all changed this weekend, wasn't it? We couldn't have had a more different race to the one at Monaco. Totally different type of track, totally different type of race to watch. And also there's been quite a lot happening, even though Monaco was only a week ago. We've had quite a lot happening in between to talk about. And I'm sure the one you've all heard about is Gasly getting his podium reinstated after Alpine appealed. And I am really, really happy for Gasly that he got that reinstated. I do think I am in agreement with a lot of people that I think it's a very awkward one. And I do understand that Gasly didn't serve his penalties, so he could then appeal them, whereas Piastri and George Russell both served those during the race, which changes matters completely. My only slight concern is, are we going to start seeing this now, that when drivers are given 5-second penalties for things that they quite rightly need to get a 5-second penalty for, are they going to start just driving for the line and hoping to sort it out afterwards, hoping to argue their case? I don't know. Well, I think it was the right thing to do because he shouldn't have had a penalty if he wasn't speeding in the pit lane. And I completely agree with that. I can understand completely how Red Bull and McLaren feel very aggrieved by it. So that's not to take anything away from Gasly, who I think absolutely deserved the third place. It's a shame he didn't get to enjoy his podium. And I do spare a bit of a thought for Hadjar, who's just had his first podium taken away from him. But overall, well done to Pierre Gasly. I'm sure you've also seen there's been a little bit of uproar about the duo, the additional development and upgrade opportunities. And this is what I talked about in a previous episode, where I, like most people, assumed that Mercedes would have the most powerful engine. It does seem very strange, doesn't it, that Mercedes, who are effectively wiping the floor with the rest of the grid, are going to get one duo token. They are going to get a chance to get this additional upgrade opportunity, which is extra money, extra test time, simply because the way that the FIA are testing the engines, they are basing it completely on the ICE, the internal combustion engine, the non-battery component of the power unit. And Red Bull have the most powerful one. But that doesn't seem to really fairly reflect what's going on track, because Mercedes have definitely got a deeper and greater understanding of the battery component of the power unit. They are definitely miles ahead of everybody else. And I did hear somebody raise a really interesting point in the week that when Mercedes left Formula E, a lot of the staff from the Formula E team would have come over to the F1 team and brought all that knowledge of batteries and battery power and deployment with them. But that could also be true of McLaren, because McLaren withdrew from Formula E last year, so it's the same principle for them. They could also have brought staff over. So I don't know how much that really has affected the ability of either team to understand the battery. But yeah, the way the duo is being measured does seem unfair. It doesn't seem right that a team that is absolutely miles in front is getting an duo token when one that is struggling more is not. So how that will pan out going forward, I do not know. Now, before we get into all of the action over the weekend, could I please ask a big favour? Could you please give me a like, a subscribe, a review, a follow on social media? Our socials are in our show notes. And if you could go on our socials and share with me some little comments, some little ideas for the show, anything you'd like to see me discuss, that would be so, so appreciated. It's such a small gesture, but it means the absolute world to me, and I would love for you to do that. Thank you. But getting back to this weekend, and free practice was quite interesting. In free practice 1, we had 7 main drivers sat out for that session because it was a chance for the rookies to take their drive. And we had Fred Vesti in for Antonelli, Dino Beganovic in for Lewis Hamilton, Leonardo Fornaroli in for Lando Norris, Ayuma Iwasa was in for Isaac Hadjar, Luke Browning was in for Alex Albon, and Paul Aron was in for Nico Hülkenberg, and Colton Herta was in for Sergio Perez. I do absolutely love watching how the rookies go in these sessions. I always think it's really, really interesting to see who's up and coming, who's getting in the car and getting the feel for it straight away. And it's always interesting, isn't it, when you actually see a rookie get in a car and set a faster time than their temporary teammate. And we did actually see this happen in FP1. I did feel extremely sorry for poor Luke Browning because Williams had an electrical fault on Albon's car, so Browning didn't get his run at all, which was absolutely such a shame for him. And it was not much better for Sainz when he first went out. I don't think he even got out of the pit lane before the car broke down. I did sit there and think, well, I did predict Williams as pull over and part this week, and we're off to a cracking start. But yeah, in FP1 it finished with Russell topping the timesheet, Piastri behind, Leclerc, then Verstappen, and then Fornaroli for McLaren, who set a very respectable fifth. Yes, he was behind Piastri, but I think he would have had his work cut out to beat Piastri's time. But out of all the 6 rookies that did actually make it onto track, he came out top. Just behind him actually was Paul Aron. He was 6th. Now he was driving the Audi in place of Nico Hülkenberg, although he is actually an Alpine reserve, but Alpine and Audi have an agreement that Paul Aron can test drive for both teams. Then we had Bogdanovic came in 8th, Iwasa in 14th, Vesti in 15th, and Colton Herta in 21st. Now, I'm not sure if any of you watched the Formula 2 or whether you caught the Formula 2 sprint today. I don't watch it religiously. I just keep an eye on it. I was watching today. I watched the sprint, and Colton Herta was heading for his first podium in Formula 2. He was in 3rd place and going extremely well. And then right at the end of the last lap, he ran wide and lost 2 places. And while it was all his own doing and all his own mistake, I really did feel bad for him because he was talking in interviews over the weekend about Audi and how keen he was to get that seat and the hoops he's basically jumping through to get his super license to get in that seat. And I did feel desperately sorry for him. There was a number of drivers struggling in FP1, notably Verstappen, who was complaining that he had both understeer and oversteer, and Bortoletto, who had absolutely no grip and seemed to be struggling right the way through the session. FP2, both the Mercedes went wide at turn 10. Verstappen was still struggling with the back end stepping out. Hamilton complained that the car felt like it was just dragging down the straight. Sainz was struggling, and Alex Albon said that he'd never driven a car so disconnected before, which is really, really not something that the Williams garage would have wanted to hear. Lawson's car also died in the pit lane, which we think was either gearbox or hydraulics. But one thing that was notable in FP2 was the extremely high tyre deg, to the point that drivers were asking whether everybody was suffering from that level of tyre deg, and indeed they were. You could literally see chunks of rubber flying off the tyres as they went around the lap. So at the end of all that, the top 5 in FP2 were Antonelli finished 5th, Leclerc finished 4th, Piastri very respectable 3rd, Russell in 2nd, and Norris actually topped the timing sheets in FP2. So then FP3, there was no one really out for the first 20 minutes of FP3. It was very, very quiet. But when they eventually did get out on track, with 25 minutes to go, Bottas brought out a red flag after he ended up in the gravel. Now, this could have been so much worse. What had basically happened was his brakes had failed completely. Now, I dread to think what would have happened if that had happened in the race, when he was on a hot lap. But having realised that his brakes had gone, he used the gears to slow him down and then popped the car into the gravel to bring it to a full stop. He did say himself about how dangerous that could have been in another situation, and he was extremely fortunate to have been able to stop the car that way. Also in FP3, Antonelli had an absolute rant down the radio about being caught in traffic. I did notice that in I think it was FP, could have been FP1, could have been FP2, he complained about Piastri, and as he came past he complained Piastri had impeded him, and then as he came past Piastri, he kind of feinted a little, move towards him, a little slightly aggressive move. And I noticed that in FP3, after having a lot of complaints about, he was very unlucky. He tried one lap and got caught in traffic. He went for another lap, he got caught in traffic. It was unfortunate, but he did complain at length, to the point where Bono pointed out to him that he himself, Bono, had no control over who else came out of the pit, and they could come out when they liked, and that Antonelli really just needed to get on with it. But he really did have a bee in his bonnet this weekend about other people getting in his way. And I think something else must have gone on, because he got a black and white flag for erratic driving and had apparently taken it upon himself to get in front of whoever had blocked him, as he felt, and then swerve in front of them and block them as well. And this is the sort of thing that I was talking about, or have been talking about recently with Antonelli, that slight hot-headedness of youth might actually have him come unstuck a little bit. And I think this whole rant this weekend was probably symptomatic of the fact that he was not having a good weekend. He said the car's not coming to him the way it normally does. He's not feeling as settled in the car as normal. And I think that's going to come out in frustration. And I think this is somewhere that he could potentially lose points and lose wins because he allows that frustration to build. And part of that's youth and part of that's being a racing driver. But that is, I think, something that, as much as he's worked on his skills within the car, I think it's a little something he could do to work on within himself, just to keep his head calm, keep himself level. So end of FP3, Russell was fastest, Piastri second, Leclerc third, Norris in fourth, and Hamilton in fifth. And on to quali, and there was not really a lot to report in quali one. We had a Williams running wide. I think we had both Williams running wide. We had Stroll off into the gravel at one point. However, for the first time in 40-something qualifying sessions, I think it's 46, Stroll actually out-qualified Alonso. So it was a great day for Stroll. So the six we lost were Alonso in 22nd, Stroll in 21st, Bottas in 20th, Perez in 19th, Albon in 18th, and Ocon in 17th. So absolutely awful day for one of the Williams. Albon not getting through to quali 2. Sainz did get through. And Ocon again out in quali 1. It's just not really coming together for Esteban at the moment, is it? I mean, yes, okay. Last time out in Monaco, he scored a couple of points, but there was a lot to say that those points were in some ways inherited, not to do him down. Still had to survive to that point. But yeah, again, a poor showing from Ocon. Quali 2. Now, considering the McLarens had gone quite well in the free practice sessions, with Norris actually topping the free practice 2, it looked like that early promise had absolutely evaporated. Not only were the McLaren struggling, but the Alpines were really, really struggling. And we actually lost both Alpines in Quali 2, which was a real shame because Gasly's been getting through to Quali 1 semi-regularly. So I think we hoped for a little bit more. So in Quali 2, we lost Sainz in 16th, Behrman in 15th. Again, Ollie's just bad luck is continuing. 14th was Gasly and 13th was Colapinto. 12th was Bortoletto and 11th was Lindblad. He'd gone well in the practice sessions and I was hoping for a Quali 1 for him and he was almost there. Now, in Quali 1, that's where things started getting a little bit more interesting. Initially, the first few fast laps, there was just Verstappen, Piastri and Norris out. Now, Verstappen got over the line to take first, and then Piastri got over the line to take first. But in the meantime, there was a yellow flag flown, which quickly became a red flag, which meant Norris had to abandon his lap with the start-finish line in sight. And it was a real shame because Norris was actually on a really good lap at that point. But the red flag was out for Charles Leclerc. Now, this stopped the clock in qualifying with 8 minutes and 30 seconds to go. Charles had understeered on turn 4, got onto the dirty part of the track, car gave a snap, and he was headfirst into the barrier. So really, really disappointing for Charles. Obviously had that crash in Monaco. He seems to have been very crashy of late. Not really sure what's going on with Charles there. Obviously he was trying out new brake discs this week in the hopes that would give him a little bit of an edge back again, but it's just not coming together for him at the moment. And I'm not really sure what's going on with Charles, whether it's the car, whether it's something he's struggling with, but again, into the barrier, not good. And then, of course, once we were underway again, it was a mad scramble for the end. And with 24 seconds of the session left to go, Antonelli took pole. 10 seconds later, Russell took it off him. And then Lando Norris went from 8th to 3rd in the dying seconds with Piastri 4th just after the checkered flag. But then Verstappen popped over the line and took 4th, and Hamilton poached 2nd, which pushed Piastri down to 7th. So Russell took pole with a time of 1 minute 14.679 seconds. Followed by Lewis Hamilton in 2nd, Kimi Antonelli in 3rd, which I think is the first time this season that Antonelli's not been on the front row for the start of a Grand Prix. Lando Norris in a very respectable 4th, Max Verstappen in 5th, Isaac Hadjar taking 6th, Oscar Piastri in 7th, Liam Lawson, another great showing by Liam this weekend, really well done to him. He's there in 8th. Nico Hülkenberg in 9th. I had heard some chat that they expected the Audis to go quite well this weekend, and Nico's definitely having a belter of a weekend. So let's hope we can convert that into some points tomorrow, as he seems to be king of P11 at the moment. And then, of course, Charles Leclerc bringing up the rear in 10th. So that was your qualifying session. So my feeling heading into race day from qualifying was that I did think that George would keep the lead. George has looked extremely comfortable all weekend. Like he's back on his game, like he's back in his groove. He said in interviews that he has stopped trying to copy-paste what Antonelli does, looking at the data, trying to copy what he does, and accepted the fact that his style is different. and just got back in tune with who he is as a driver. I felt that he was really, really back in his groove this weekend. He was very much more confident. Like I said, that he was more in tune with his own style of driving and not trying to copy Kimi. And so I really, really expected for George to keep that lead. So race day rolled round, and it was really lots and lots of chat all about the tyres and the tyre wear, the tyre deck. Most were on mediums. There were some on soft tyres, notably Hamilton sitting on the front row, and a couple on the hard tyres. Now, I was really, really looking forward, as you know, to this long drive down to that first corner. I really thought we were going to see something spectacular. And I actually have to say I was a little bit disappointed as they all very much arrived at the corner in the order they left the starting grid in. So that first corner was a little bit underwhelming for me. But Hamilton was straight away chasing down Russell. Piastri gained a place. Charles Leclerc, actually, having ended up down in 10th, he gained 3 places. Hadjar, unfortunately, had a terrible start and lost a number of places, but then starts carving his way through the field. He goes around the outside of Sainz at turn 3, and then around the outside of Colapinto. He was really, really just pushing and on one. Lance Stroll retires with gearbox issues on lap 6, so another bad day for the Aston Martins. Leclerc carries on moving his way up and manages to get past Oscar Piastri on lap 8. Hadjar still carving his way through the field, and he's actually up to 8th place by lap 21. So Lewis pits on lap 12 and comes off his soft tyres and onto hards. And Mercedes made the decision to bring in Russell a lap later, which I didn't quite understand, as they clearly knew that they were on a completely different strategy. The Mercedes doing a 2-stop and Ferrari doing a 3-stop with Hamilton. So I don't really know why they had George ditch his medium tyres after only 13 laps, because they would have gone longer. Lando Norris then pits on lap 14, Antonelli and Piastri on 15. Leclerc is actually asked to come in and he refuses, but pits on lap 17 instead. There's a little bit of friction between the two Alpines, who didn't qualify very well. Weren't really having a great weekend. Gasly was insisting that he was faster than Colapinto. He was tucked behind Colapinto. Colapinto wasn't really making any inroads into Hülkenberg in front of him, and Gasly felt that he was faster. Then on lap 28, Hamilton pits again. Mercedes don't cover him this time, with Hamilton being a 2-stop. But Hamilton goes back out, still setting fastest laps, while Russell's struggling, and as a consequence, Antonelli starts to catch up with Russell. Norris is in on lap 36 because Hamilton's catching him. Hamilton gets through. Russell pits on lap 34 to come out 4th, and then Antonelli comes in the following lap and comes back out 4th. While this is happening, Albon unfortunately retires from the race again. Russell then passes Leclerc, and then on lap 41, Fernando Alonso retires from the race. His car breaks down and it brings out a VSC. And this is where what's been quite a steady race so far. It's not really been high action. There's been enough to keep you interested, watching various battles up and down the field. I'm wondering how things are going to work out with tyre strategy and pit strategy. But it's not been the most exciting race to watch. But this is where it all starts to get a bit interesting, because as Hamilton, who's now leading, comes past the pit entry, that is when the VSC is thrown. That's when he's notified that there is a VSC, so he can't pit. So it was a little bit of heart in mouth, because initially I didn't see that he'd seen that the VSC was out until he'd passed the pits. And I was thinking it was another Ferrari disaster class in strategy, and they decided not to bring Hamilton in, which I think by this point, myself and the rest of the family were screaming at the TV. We're like, why have you not brought him in? But in actual fact, he did manage to get all the way around. He then gets into the pit and has his pit stop, gets fresh tyres. And then as he exits the pit lane, the VSC ends, which is absolute perfect timing, and Hamilton leads. Behind him, on lap 61, Antonelli goes to overtake Russell and gets ahead for second place behind Hamilton. Russell and Antonelli have a bit of back and forth, a little bit scrapping, to the point that Antonelli gets gently warned by the team to just be careful. Now it's looking that this battle between the two Mercedes for second place could go either way at this point. I would say, looking at the way Kimi was driving, that he probably had the edge over Russell slightly. And I thought, oh no, poor George, this is another weekend where at least this time he's had the promise of something better. And he's been really buoyed up and he's taken pole, and now he's going to end up finishing behind Antonelli. But the day wasn't quite done, was it? And on lap 62, Antonelli suddenly slows, and it's a power unit failure, which takes him out of the race. Very, very shortly after that, Leclerc also retires with a power steering issue, and then Behrman. So we had 3 drivers go out within 4 laps. They just literally dropped like flies at the end of the race. I've not been able to find out what Behrman's issue was, but that obviously brought out another VSC. And with only a handful of laps to the end, I was really hoping, I was like, please don't let it end under VSC. I really hope the VSC goes in before the checkered flag is thrown, because there's something really lovely about being able to cross that line at racing speed. And I really wanted that for Hamilton. And sure enough, the VSC ended and Hamilton was indeed able to take the checkered flag. This win brings Hamilton, who's sitting second in the Drivers' Championship, to within 41 points of Antonelli, which, yes, that sounds like quite a lot. But again, I throw you back to last year. There was gaps like that between the two McLaren boys in Piastri's favour, but Lando still took the championship. What's going to happen going forward, I don't know, but we could end up with a three-way fight, which would be absolutely brilliant to watch. So yeah, obviously Hamilton, very emotional. His first podium for Ferrari. He did get a sprint win in his first year, but his first full race podium in first place for Ferrari, absolutely brilliant. And the relief and the emotion was quite touching to witness when he had to sort of take a moment, and the cameraman was filming him, and he got out of the car and he waved and greeted people, and then he just took a moment where he bobbed down to just collect his thoughts. And then Lando kind of stormed into the view of the camera to get himself weighed. But then obviously congratulated Hamilton straight away. I also noticed that Kimi was one of the very first drivers to come over and congratulate him. And I don't think there was anybody up and down that pit lane that wasn't pleased for Hamilton. It was absolutely brilliant to see. Last year was painful. Even as somebody who I wouldn't consider myself a Lewis Hamilton superfan by any means, it was sad. It was really upsetting and painful to watch him deteriorate. And a family member did say to me last year that as much as they didn't want to believe it, they did think that perhaps it was time for Lewis to retire, that perhaps his career was over. And I said, let's give him a chance. Give him a chance next year to see what he can do. He doesn't like the Grand Force era cars. Let's see what he can do with the new regulations. And absolutely, it's lit a fire under him, hasn't it? He's absolutely going for it. And it was a joy to see. I really enjoyed that. And of course, you've got to go back a fair way, really, to Lewis's last win. His last official win was in Belgium at Spa in 2024. And that was where Russell actually won the race, but was later disqualified. So Hamilton got the win. But the actual time that he was on the top step of the podium was at the British Grand Prix, again in 2024. So that win has been a long time coming. And I'm so very pleased for him. While I say that I do have no British bias, it was pointed out to me that it was actually an all-British podium, and that's the first time since 1968. So well done to those guys. And just looking briefly at our third-place finisher, Lando Norris, that's only his second podium of the year. I mean, I've gone on at length about the absolute rubbish luck that Norris has endured this year, but I really thought that he drove a very good race today. He absolutely maximised what he had with that car. He was on the pace all weekend. He definitely outpaced Piastri, which surprised me because I always think of Barcelona as a bit of a Piastri track. Drove an absolutely solid race, managed his tyres really well, so definitely deserved that podium. So the podium was Lewis Hamilton with the win, George Russell in second, Lando Norris was third, Max Verstappen was fourth, and I don't think anybody actually really mentioned Max for the entire race. But it's not to be overlooked that was still a very decent and solid drive, a good points finish, but a little bit anonymous. Never really saw him do anything or anybody really mention him much. Piastri brought it home for fifth, which good solid points for McLaren again, but really he was outpaced by Norris this weekend. Hadjar, after his disaster start, had brought it home sixth. And I noticed Hadjar was really on the pace of Verstappen this weekend. Not a lot between them in qualifying at all. And considering, as I say, that he had that disaster at the start, to finish only a couple of places behind Verstappen is very admirable. Now, we had Gasly finishing seventh, Colapinto finishing eighth. So double points again for the Alpines. And I have to say, I was really surprised by that as well, because where they qualified, I thought they were well off the pace this weekend and would come limping home outside of the points. So well done to those guys. Lawson took ninth and Lindblad took 10th. And again, double points for the Racing Bulls, which was, again, absolutely brilliant. Lawson and Lindblad absolutely driving the socks off this part of this season. So I hope this carries on for them. Now, a quick edit to say, since recording the place finishes, it's come to light that Antonelli's got a 5-second penalty for track limits. I think you remember he was warned a few times by Bono during the race that that's it now. You've had all of your track limits you're going to be allowed. And Will Joseph was saying to Norris, keep an eye on him. If you can push him, nudge him into a bit of a mistake, make him run wide again, track limits. And I believe at one point Will Joseph did say that he's definitely exceeded track limits again. We're going to the stewards with this. And yes, it made no difference to Antonelli in the end because he was a DNF. But had he finished the race, he probably would have stood on the podium, but he would have had that podium taken away and Lando given third place because he got a 5-second penalty. Now that changed the order slightly. And also another penalty that's just come to light, and this is really sad actually, but I completely understand why it happens, and as a marshal I'm fully behind it. Colapinto has received a 5-second penalty for not slowing under the yellows, which has dropped him down to 10th, which means he's still in the points. But of course that now means that Lawson finished 8th and Lindblad finished 9th, Colapinto finished 10th. So yes, that's just come to light after the race. So yes, what started out as a little bit of a steady race, it got a little bit more interesting in the middle. It certainly saved the best for last because all the drama was packed into the last few laps, wasn't it? But overall, a really enjoyable race. Now, to look back at my predictions for the Barcelona-Catalunya race. So when it came to qualifying, I had George Russell on pole, which he indeed did take. In second place, joining him on the front row, I had Antonelli, which, as we know, was not the case. It was actually Lewis Hamilton. In third place, I predicted Verstappen. I was expecting more from Verstappen and from Red Bull in general this weekend. But now, as I've said, a very, very anonymous race from Verstappen. And it was actually Antonelli that took third. Fourth on the grid, I predicted to be Oscar Piastri, and it was in fact Lando Norris. And fifth, I predicted to be Lando Norris, and it was indeed Max Verstappen. Now, when it came to the race, I predicted George Russell as our winner, and it was in fact Lewis Hamilton. In second place, I predicted Kimi Antonelli, and it was actually George Russell. In third place, I predicted Lando Norris, and I'm pleased to say I got that one right. So, go me. In fourth place, I predicted Leclerc, who, as we know, was a DNF, and in fifth, I predicted Hamilton, because I did actually think that Leclerc would slightly outperform Hamilton this weekend, and that clearly wasn't the case. Now, hit the mark and pull over and park. This is a mixed bag for me. My hit the mark I predicted for this week would be Oscar Piastri. Thought he would go extremely well. Similar track to Suzuka where he did so well. Absolutely overdue an upturn in form and won it last year. But it was just a bit lacklustre from Oscar this weekend. He never really looked truly comfortable. He just kind of half-heartedly didn't really seem to show up. And I'm not saying that it was a half-hearted effort, of course. I'm quite sure he gave it his all. But in the same way that Max was a little bit anonymous this race, so was Piastri really. So no, I definitely don't think I can claim the hit the mark this week. And that makes me sad to say because I've got a lot of time for Oscar. My pull over and park was absolutely bang on the money. As suspected, Williams had a shocker of a weekend. Only one car into quali 2. Couldn't get the car going in free practice 1 for Luke Browning to have his drive. Sainz broke down going out in free practice 1. No points again this weekend. Retirement from Albon. Sent him back out 8 laps later to what was, I'm assuming, a test run to collect data. And just an absolute weekend to forget all about for Williams, which I suspected it would be like this. And I think when James Vowles was interviewed at the weekend, he made no bones about the fact that it wasn't going to be their weekend. But wow, was it really not their weekend? So yeah, mixed bag on the predictions. Not a total disaster, but not exactly brilliant either. So to round things off, it is our flattering ram. And who shall we beat with the flattering ram this week? Now, it would be very, very easy to give the flattering ram to Lewis Hamilton for his absolutely fantastic drive. And in a lot of ways, I'd like to do that. I think he absolutely deserves it. But I wanted to take a bit of a step back and look at the wider picture. And with that in mind, I am awarding this week's flattering ram to the Ferrari team as a whole. Particularly Carlos Sainz, he gets a little bit of a special mention. Everybody in that team did an amazing job this weekend. And nobody was more surprised than me to find that Ferrari did a strategy call and it was brilliant. It was not a Ferrari special. It was absolutely great. And I'd just like to give a nod to the whole Ferrari team because they really have listened to Lewis, made the changes that he needed. Last year, as he said, he didn't feel listened to. He and his race engineer didn't gel at all. And there was a lack of communication and there was just a lack of good feeling, it felt like. Everything felt very spiky and unpleasant. And to listen to the support that he gets from the team now, to see that they've taken on board what he said. They've allowed him to be himself and they've changed their ways of operating to accommodate him. Carlos Sainz is absolutely brilliant as Lewis's race engineer. I just think he is amazing. The way he speaks to Lewis, I think that Fred Vasseur is absolutely great with Lewis. The fact that he calls him Luigi. I feel like Lewis has finally really settled into Ferrari. I think that Lewis came with a very set way of doing things and Ferrari had a very set way of doing things, and there was a lot of adaptation had to be made on both sides, and that they've done extremely well. And I'm starting to see this real bloom now for Ferrari as regards to their relationship with Lewis. And I think they've been super on it this weekend, super supportive, super organised, and just absolutely excellent at their job. A little nod to Charles Leclerc on this one. He really is having an absolute nightmare of a time at the moment. He just cannot get a break. So hopefully some of that love and care that is being shown to Lewis will be shown also to Charles, and I'm absolutely sure it will. Charles has been there a long, long time, and he's going to need some support at the moment because things are really not going his way. But just in general, I really, really love the vibe at Ferrari at the minute. And to let you into a little secret, historically, Ferrari were never really my favourite team, which is actually, looking back now, even I'm kind of baffled by it because I absolutely love Italy. I've been to Monza to the Grand Prix back in 2000. It was absolutely amazing, and the tifosi and the people and the setting and being able to, you can't walk around that banking anymore even back then, but you could go and look at it, you could go and see it from a distance. Just the whole place is absolutely amazing. I love all things Italian. My father lived and worked in Italy for a number of years. I love Italy. I love everything about it. I actually love Ferrari cars. So really, on paper, I should have been a Ferrari fan from the start. But the rivalry between Villeneuve and Schumacher was the thing that kind of sealed the fate of Ferrari in my eyes a little bit. Some of the decisions that were made way back when I wasn't a fan of. I didn't really like the way that everything was run, and it put me off Ferrari for a long time. So those who know me well, who are listening to this, will be absolutely stunned to hear me say that I'm hitting Ferrari with the flattering ram this week for a job well done, and for the fact that the vibes at Ferrari are absolutely top tier at the moment, and I absolutely love it. So that wraps up my review of the Barcelona-Catalunya Grand Prix. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. I think it turned out to be a really fantastic and interesting race in the end. Now, although we've got a packed schedule, we've actually got next weekend off before we go to the Red Bull Ring, which is another great track that I really, really enjoy. There will be a little extra episode this week as myself and a family member are getting together to do a little bit of an extra episode. We're going to have a bit of a bash at driver ratings. And this is myself and my eldest son. So we often have very, very differing ideas. We do have certain drivers we like in common, but there are also others that we can get a little bit heated about. So we're going to see how that's going to pan out. That will be out at the end of this week. So looking forward to bringing you that as just a little bit of something extra. So until then, look after yourselves. Enjoy your week. Do not work too hard. Be kind to yourself. And don't forget the cheesy tagline. That tracks F1 Podcast. Track the action. Join the fun. Bye.